Hey everyone, you're listening to the official podcast of 4playernetwork.com. Check us out at that address for everything you need to know about our community, monthly giveaways, and nightly live streams. You can even support us on Patreon at patreon.com/4player. And last but not least, you can catch the live recordings of these podcasts every single Thursday night on our Twitch channel. We hope to see you there. Enjoy. Let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome to 4Player Podcast. This is episode 744. I am your host this evening, Nick Henderson. I'm joined tonight by Brad Simons.
Hello.
And Christopher Davis.
Good evening.
And that's it. This is a 3-player podcast this week. It's kind of exciting. It's going to be a little...
It can't be done. It can't be done. I've never heard a podcast that had less than 4 people.
I see what you're doing. You're poking fun, Brad, at my stress levels when I find out that we have less than 4 people. I see what you're doing.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Hey, what can I say? We have a nice group of friends here. I like to. I sometimes I feel like we're leaving people out if we don't fill the table.
Hey,
at
this
least
just
4
means
seats.
I get to talk about my shit even longer. Yay.
Well, so we are convenient. So we're starting to get into kind of like release, windows here.
February is just about begun.
Yeah, so like next week we'll have Dead Space, and we're gonna talk a little Forspoken tonight, but we're gonna take a deeper dive into it next week. I think so.
Honestly,
that's gonna be a pretty
none
big
of the
week.
Stuff that we're talking about this week is gonna be a very deep dive, to be completely honest.
Fair enough, but the point is, we wanted to make sure we get a podcast out this week because we haven't talked about Fire Emblem Engage, we haven't talked about Forspoken, and Tango Gameworks shadowdropped a new game this week, and there's a lot to unpack there. And in addition to the fact that now we have actually played some of that game called Hi-Fi Rush, we'll talk about that, which is exciting. But before we get into all that, I want to do a quick. We've been doing this every week. I like to say we're going to do like monthly updates to this fantasy draft, but we've been doing it every week. But it's the end of the month. This is the last podcast of January, so I want to make sure we talk about where we stand right now on our draft. Because if you haven't yet, please go back and check out the first episode we did of 2023. We did our initial draft picks for this fantasy critic draft. It's all of our lineups are scored based on open critic review scores. And now, at the time of this recording, we've had several games released and scored. And I just want to let you know that I'm coming out of the gate hot with negative 1.2 points or something.
Actually, negative 0.9. It's gone up.
Negative 0.9. Things have changed. That's pretty nice.
Progress.
But Brad is actually, first of all, Brad, fuck you for picking Dead Space. That was
okay. Y'all picked so many of my games. I don't want to fucking hear it.
That's true. That is true. So yeah, I am sitting at negative 0.9. Good point, Chris Davis. I did make I did do a late bid on Forspoken, and that came from the heart a little bit. And it was also getting some pre-release buzz that it might be better than some people were expecting.
Hey Nick, how much did you spend on it? Out of curiosity.
$1. I spent $1 on it.
I was just gonna say,
nobody
because if you don't expect other people to bid, you should probably just only spend $1 on your bids.
Yeah. I didn't. Yeah.
But what's gonna happen is later in the season, especially if we're like dropping games because they get delays announced, we're gonna really start sweating like, oh shit, I got to pick up a game, and so does 3 other people, and this game is the only good-looking game left. We all have to bid on, and it's really going to drive up those prices. And you gotta save your money for the back half of the year, to be honest. But
November, December is going to be interesting when it comes to this draft. But so we'll talk. Like I said, we'll talk about Forspoken a little bit tonight because Chris Davis has played a few hours of it, and I'm going to be playing it. And Brad, and I'm going to be playing some of it this week, so hopefully we'll talk about it more next week. But Brad had Fire Emblem Engage and Dead Space on his initial draft. Fantasy Critic has not yet registered the points for Dead Space, but I will say right now it's sitting at about an 89.8. which if that holds, you're looking at about 19 to 20 points. But Fire Emblem Engage got an 82.4 on Open Critic, which gives you 12.4 points. So
this is good. This is kind of it's kind of averaged out because basically all my picks were like, I was kind of aiming for around like an 85, right? Like as far as like where I thought my games would kind of average, not necessarily the top, not necessarily the bottom, but kind of the average. I could see them getting an 85. That was sort of the thought behind all my picks because I feel like, trying to go for the home runs isn't just it's not gonna win you the game. So I'm trying to get on base, right?
Just out of curiosity,
yeah.
What was the Open Critic score for Fire Emblem Three Houses?
89.
89.
Yeah,
so
I was just looking at
it. Yeah, but Fire Emblem Three Houses was not only like the best received Fire Emblem game, was also like the best selling. It was just sort of a well, we'll talk about the differences, I guess, when we get into it. But we're definitely going to talk about that. So
for sure,
let's say I'm not surprised. I was expecting it to be this one to be low 80s. Right. I picked it up because I knew that would be like the worst it would get. It would never go below an 80. I've never seen a Fire Emblem game go below an 80. So
yeah. And on my front, I'm actually really nervous now because the first game coming up for me is Hogwarts, which on the base level could go either way, just one way or the other, right? I mean, it's getting a lot of positive buzz right now, which is nice. But at the same time, we've also had conversations about, because of all of the controversy surrounding that game, kind of like what do critical scores even look like? Is it going to get fewer reviews in general because certain places? I mean, here's my question. Because of the controversy, are certain outlets?
Thing about Hogwarts, controversy aside, here's the thing about Hogwarts. It's going to be like an event, right? This year.
Well, yeah. Absolutely.
It is going to be a massive, enormous game.
But it's going to be that way even if it's
because of that, SEO, like website traffic is going to be super important. People are going to be running like so many articles and shit. Guides are going to be huge for this game.
Well, that's all.
Here's the thing about the critic response. Is I noticed that critics will respond to like good vibes. Like if a lot of people are playing this game and the general populace is happy about like their experience, like, oh my god, it's the Hogwarts of our dreams, even if they notice like, oh, some flaws in the game, I think they're not going to be as hard on it as they would like, say, picking apart Cyberpunk, where like a game like let's say like a Mass Effect Andromeda. They know that everyone's upset about this fucking thing before it even releases, right? And as soon as the game comes out, there's bugs and people are just generally unhappy, and I feel like you see lower scores because of that. So I think even if it's kind of not the deepest,
but here's
not the most complex or like interesting game of the year, if millions and millions of people are playing it and the vibes are good, I think it's going to trend higher in terms of like scores.
But here's my counter argument to that is one, I think this game is going to be an event, like you said, even if it's like a 70. I don't think the score is going to really impact.
Oh, of course,
that.
of course. Yeah.
So like
nothing to do with
everything that you just said could be totally true, and I still might end up with 0 points or negative.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a 70, it could be a 90, but it's probably more like an 80, right? Either way,
that's what I'm hoping for. But the other part of this that I'm a little concerned about, and I totally get it because there's obviously a lot of controversy around it, and I don't even want to get into that. I don't want to get into that. It's too messy. I don't want to get into it. It's just I all I want to say is I'm a little nervous going into the review period for that game, because now I have points writing on it in addition to the fact that I'm already just nervous about it because this is one of my most anticipated games of the generation.
I'll tell you this much: if people are passionate about like about how they feel about the author, right? I don't think it's going to be like J.K. Rowling is a poop head, so minus 10 points. Like that's not how games are going to get reviewed. They're either going to review it or they're not. But there's still going to be like dozens and dozens and dozens of reviews. It's too big of an event. And
so here's the other part of
People
that.
are going to play it.
Here's the other part of that.
People are going to be upset.
Somebody in chat pointed this out because, like you said, this does have a chance that it could be like hovering around a 90, right? Or like 85 to 90 or something. Potentially.
I'd be very surprised if it hits 90, but yeah.
But potentially. And it is also the first counter pick that's going to be coming up this year. No one picked this.
Yeah, that was a bold fucking counter pick, to be honest.
He also picked Zelda. So if Hogwarts is good, he could be just negating a huge chunk of the points he's going to be picking up for Tears of the Kingdom. Which is what makes this all interesting. It's what makes this whole thing a fun adventure. So I'm very excited. I'm both excited and nervous. And honestly, one thing I really like about this is because I've been very stressed about the whole Hogwarts thing for obvious reasons. And like this whole
because the author's a piece of shit.
The author is a huge piece of shit. I fucking can't stand her. But I'm also a huge fan. I'm excited for the game. But that's a whole other conversation. But like the draft is kind of making this. It's adding like a kind of like a lighthearted element to this, making it. It's softening the blow a little bit for me, which is nice. This whole thing is super fun. I'm so excited to see how this shakes out in 2023.
Do you want to know the secret reason for why I wanted to do this? Not just because I thought it was fun, but because anytime I bring up scores in our Discord, people just start shaming me. And this gave me an excuse to talk about scores all year long, and then they can't really talk shit because we're playing a game.
That's what happened, motherfucker. God damn it.
One last question before we move away from the draft. Chris Davis.
Yes.
You had there was an announcement this week, and I noticed that it doesn't look like you've bid on it yet. But Me announced their new game.
How does bidding work, by the way? Do we have public bidding or secret bidding?
It's public bidding. So if the game is added to their database, you can log in, go in there, find the game, and bid on it.
And people will see that you've bid on that game?
Yes, and that gives them a chance to outbid you if they want it, and then there could be a bidding war.
I see.
But the bidding ends like they set up they poll everything at like it's like midnight on Saturdays or whatever. So if nobody outbids you before that, it's on your list. So I noticed you haven't bid on the new. What's that new game called? The
Shadow Gambit: The Cursed Crew.
So I don't like the title so much, but this is the team that made Desperados 3, and I love that game.
Version of that. Yeah, Desperados.
Yeah. I like Pirates, and I love Desperados 3, so I am super on board for this. But you were really excited, and you were like, I can't wait to bid on this, and I noticed you haven't done it yet. Are you gonna do it?
Have I?
Oh shit! Did you just do it?
Well, how do you see
I did it 5 minutes after I watched the trailer, Nick.
Then maybe
How do we see bids?
Hold on.
They don't. Okay, so once a bid is placed, they don't reveal bids for 2 days.
Oh, maybe that's why I didn't see it. That's probably why I didn't see it. Okay. Yeah. So all I'm saying.
So if you try to take it from me, I will kill you.
I didn't say I was gonna, dude. I shot my shot.
Do you actually think that's gonna hit this year, though? They
said 2023.
It's been 3 years since Desperados 3. I think they
are the kind of team that tends to announce things closer to release. So, I shot my shot, right? I did Forspoken. I'm gonna hold back for a little bit. I need to be smart with my last 5 picks. Oh, this is one other thing. I don't think we mentioned this on the podcast last week, or maybe I did. I don't remember. But one thing we did do very recently is when we did the initial draft, we were basing it off of we were going to each have a roster of 12 games. We have upped it by 2 to 14. So it gives us more opportunities to pick up games, more bidding, all that kind of stuff throughout the year. So it's going to be a good time. And I saw Chris Davis get really excited for a second about Hi-Fi Rush, and I was like, slow your roll, man. Slow your roll. It is January.
Does it have it? Yeah, I tried to bid on that just to see if it would let me, and it said it was ineligible.
Me too. I mean,
and the argument for that being that one, that game was shadow dropped, and people were playing it almost instantly, and the hype and the positivity around that game was almost immediately apparent. Yeah. So it's almost like if you were able to bid on that, it's like you're going to pull in points. So it just kind of makes it unfair. So I
Damn.
think games that are shadow dropped are probably just not eligible for this. But we're
Yeah,
going to
that's
talk
really
about it
rough.
tonight. But we're going to talk. I mean, it doesn't happen often, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But we are going to talk about Hi-Fi Rush tonight. So why don't we jump into the first game? I want to talk about because we haven't talked about Fire Emblem Engage.
Oh,
Brad, why is this game worse than Three Houses?
okay. First of all, that's a really dumb way to look at it because
I'm
Fire
I'm
Emblem
trolling
games have
you.
been coming out in the West, since the GBA, and of course since from on the Famicom in the '80s in Japan. We didn't get the series till much later. Um, and you keep referencing Three Houses, but like that's by
I'm
far the highest scoring, like best selling, most mainstream
sure,
Fire
but
Emblem
this
game
is the
that there's
follow-up to
been.
that. But this is
It's
like
not
the
that, but that's the thing. It's not the follow up to that. It's not even the same developer. Like Intelligent Systems didn't. At least they didn't lead development on Three Houses. That was Tecmo Koei, who's helped, works with Nintendo a lot these days.
sure.
This is just a very different type of Fire Emblem experience. I think what got people talking about Three Houses was they kind of did the whole like persona thing, right, where you were spending all this time at the monastery between battles, and you had to go to class or you taught classes, and everything followed on this like calendar schedule, and you were just spending a lot of time hanging out at the monastery in between battles, and like people really grew attached to like the characters and their classes and stuff, and it was just a very like it was, but no other Fire Emblem has been like that, really. Like that was
Right.
the first one to really take that
And
sort of shape. I mean, they've been kind of like dabbling in with some of the social stuff since Awakening. I mean, supports have been a thing in Fire Emblem for a very long time, and they've
but
just been gradually developing into what was in Three Houses. And I applaud Three Houses because it finally took a lot of those system, like the social elements and a lot of the side systems between battle, and kind of like synergized them in such a way. I mean, it was very like cohesive, right? And like it really fit like the setting and the narrative
can I just clarify real
just
quick?
just the structure of that game.
Can I just interject real quick because I want to clarify.
Yes.
One, I was just kind of trolling you when I asked that leading question about why is this worse than Three
No,
Houses,
no, I know, but I'm explaining
and
it because
two,
it's like
I
important
know
part of this conversation.
you're right, you're right. But two, when I say it's a follow up to Three Houses, you are right. It's a different developer, and but more of what I'm saying is this is the first Fire Emblem game since Three Houses, and that game was tremendously popular.
Yeah,
So
but you
it
know what was even more popular than Three Houses? Fire Emblem Heroes. And this,
okay.
which is the mobile game, and this game is one. It's not structured like Three Houses at all. It's more structured like a traditional like Fire Emblem game, pre
I
Three
think a lot of
Houses.
people saw that Citadel and figured that would be like the monastery.
No, but I mean, like Fire Emblem Fates had that before Three Houses had something like that. It's not really nothing like the monastery. You're not really spending a lot of time there, and there is a lot of things to do there. But even that stuff is not like this required significant part of the game like it was in Three Houses. Three Houses, you had to teach your classes, you had to do a lot of that stuff. It was like a key part of that game. Here, the stuff you do at the Somniel, which is your little floating island in the sky thing that you do your stuff at, a lot of that stuff is just kind of like, I don't know, so far seems pretty pointless. Like temporary boosts and just hanging out with your pet. It's not required, which means you can kind of play it more like an older Fire Emblem game where you kind of go from battle to battle to battle, which is what the series used to be. The remember when I was talking about how like when the vibes are really good, when like a game is being played by so many people and everybody's happy, everybody's talking about it, the reviews trend higher. And I think that's what happened with Three Houses, honestly. That's why it's the same thing with like Metroid Dread or whatever, right? Why like it people in critics kind of feed off those vibes, but like Fire Emblem Three Houses, honestly, I really like that game, but like in terms of like the Fire Emblem games I've played, it's one of the worst in terms of like in battle, in combat Fire Emblem experiences, which is like sort of the core of that series. And I could also see why a lot of people kind of don't like all the required stuff you're doing between battles. So I don't know if this is necessarily a response to that, but it's probably more just since this one's developed 100% by Intelligent Systems, they're probably just kind of making the games that how they used to make them before, but influenced a little bit by Fire Emblem Heroes. Now, Fire Emblem Heroes is the Fire Emblem game on mobile, but it was also a gacha, and you were rolling for like classic Fire Emblem characters. That is a big like kind of component to this game, and I do apologize for this footage. It's just like in combat footage. I was just in a battle, and it was a long fight, and that's sort of what my footage is. But there is like a little bit of running around you can do like in the Somniel. It's still like has that sort of like 3D zoomed in stuff you can do. In fact, after a battle, you can run around the map and like that you fought on and like talk to characters and stuff. But
Does it almost feel like maybe
so
Nintendo was like,
it,
okay, you should make at least some part of this kind of reminiscent of Three Houses so that it pulls in that
no, no, no,
people that
no.
are familiar?
They again like it's such a misconception. They were doing that 3D running around stuff even before Three Houses. They were doing that stuff in Echoes, you know. But nobody played Echoes. That was the first Fire Emblem that was fully voiced. That was the
Was
first
that
one
one
that
on the
where you were
DS?
running around environments in 3D. Yeah, on the 3DS. And Three Houses was just sort of an evolution of that. And now
Right.
we're kind of here. It and so it's inspired by Fire Emblem Heroes, and sort of the legacy of like the series and those characters are a very big part of this game. They have the engage system is all about these rings that you equip on all the different characters, and you basically summon, you know, uh, spirit versions of these classic Fire Emblem characters, like Marth and the lead characters from all these different Fire Emblem games, right? And
Mhm.
they sort of like give you special abilities and like buff your character, and you can kind of like swap them around and like put them on different characters. You can inherit skills from these legacy spirits or whatever, right? And it sort of just adds like this layer of customization and tinkering to your party that you don't really see in like a ton of Fire Emblem games. Honestly, I say this is probably the most customization heavy I've seen in a Fire Emblem game. It's getting closer to that sort of Final Fantasy Tactics thing. There used to be almost no customization in Fire Emblem, and now it's been like more and more and more, and we're kind of here now, right? But
Right.
I will say in terms of like an on battlefield experience, like this is I think the fights in this game are much more like engaging. No pun intended, than they
Eh,
were in Three
eh,
Houses.
eh.
Again, Three Houses has some of my least favorite like map design,
Scenarios.
combat design, scenario design, and just basic gameplay of any Fire Emblem game. And this is like a huge step up over that. And I think a lot of it is because you have so many more options in terms of like all these abilities and stuff and when to activate them. And honestly, just a little bit harder. I feel like even on hard difficulty, like Three Houses was just a cakewalk. You just like mowed through every battle in that game without too much resistance, honestly. And here I've really got into like shitty situations, tough situations, and really because I'm playing on classic, so I can lose characters where I've really had to kind of think and like try to think my way out of situations. And I've had to restart battles, which is kind of what happens when you're playing on classic. You make a bad move and you get punished for it. And some people turn off classic mode and just play casual mode, which means your characters can die in battle, but they just come back after the battle. And some
Right.
people say, well, I don't want to retry fights, so I just play it that way. But the thing is, when you play on casual, when you know that a character is expendable, you're playing differently, right? You're not playing as tactically, you're not playing as scared, if you will, when a situation goes bad, because you can just throw a character out into the fray and they'll die and it doesn't matter. But here, you really got to be careful. And I feel like because of that, I'm finding this game a lot more tactically rewarding than Three Houses. And even some like I wasn't really too much of a too. I mean, I played Birthright versus Fates. When I played Fates and not Conquest, which was the Fire Emblem with two versions. People say the map design and stuff is a lot better in Conquest, but in Birthright it was pretty bad. In Awakening, I mean, honestly, when it comes to Awakening and Fates, I didn't really love like the dueling character system. So I'm kind of happy that this is sort of a return to like the on battlefield gameplay of Fire Emblem games pre Fates. I mean pre Awakening. So I find that nice. It's hard, and there's some cool new ideas. Like there's a break system, right? The weapon triangle, which was gone in Three Houses, is back. But now instead of just giving you like a big like accuracy and evasion like advantage or whatever, like in previous games, now if you attack like your opposing weapon in the weapon triangle, you actually create a break effect, which means they can't counterattack you, and they can't counterattack anybody for the rest of the round, which is like a huge, like significant, like bonus by it for when you attack an enemy that is weak to the weapon you're using. So you're just sort of thinking about positioning and stuff a lot more because you're you're trying to make sure you get your breaks off and make sure it doesn't happen to you, because if the enemy hits you with an axe and you're using a lance, then you're going to get broken. So it's just, I mean, it's pretty rewarding tactically, which is, to me, kind of what I wanted to get back to. Honestly, I'm enjoying this much more on the battlefield, which is a huge thing for me.
So, can
Now,
I ask you a
the
question?
story and the
Because
characters, they are kind of like stupid and insufferable. Not insufferable. Well, they're pretty insufferable.
because
So if this game lost points, with the critics, it's because like there is almost nothing to latch on to with like story and characters, which is unfortunate because while I don't think that's ever really been the strength of the series, it was at its best in Three Houses. I think Three
yeah.
Houses did have the best characters, did have the best story, did have the best setting, and here it's just all kind of like whatever, right?
So
There's yeah.
that's why I was about to ask you about that because and I know what you're gonna say because you told me this before and you always tend to say it. Every time I show interest in like a tactical RPG, like, you try to talk me out of it, and for good reason.
No.
For good
Well, I
reason.
tried to talk you out of this one. I tried to talk you into Three Houses, and you played it, and you
No,
didn't really finish it.
no,
But that's still the
I
one that's for you.
yeah, yeah, and honestly, I had this game pre-ordered. I was like, this is like my first game I'm going to dive into in 2023. And then I saw the reviews starting to
Oh
roll
yeah,
out, and they were talking specifically about characters and story being really
yeah,
forgettable. And I was like, that's the kind of the thing. That's the thing I kind of need to pull. Like, I will play the combat system. Like for me, like when I played Three Houses, like I didn't recognize necessarily that the combat system was weaker. The combat system was what kept me going, kept me interested between the things that I really cared about, which was like the monastery, the characters, the story, and everything. And obviously, it seems like now we're kind of switching. So it sounds like
yeah.
this is not, because part of me still wants to try this. Like I'm watching this footage and this looks pretty cool, and the characters to me look pretty cool. Like this
Yeah.
seems like the kind
So
of thing
so
I
like
want.
this is like the best looking and best running Fire Emblem game. Like it's a really, the animations are better than they've ever been in 3D at least, and like the character models look really great, the cutscenes look really great. For the first time ever, you really did get a true transition from like the overview map to when you're in battle, you're actually on the map zoomed in, and
Yeah,
it's never really truly been like they've kind of gotten close before, but now you actually see like the pillars and the doorways and stuff when you're in a fight, when you're
yeah.
zoomed in, and like they've never had that before, and that's cool. Like it's a cool step forward. Eventually they're going to be getting to a point where there's no longer this abstracted like zoomed out view, and it's maybe more of like something like Valkyria Chronicles or even like an XCOM or whatever, that
Yeah.
more cinematic, like seamlessly, if you will, from I mean character selection to combat.
So
um
maybe my like last question for you uh is are the story and the characters in this game actively bad, or are they just bad by comparison to Three Houses? You know what I mean?
well,
Because I feel
but
like
I
there is a
mean, are they even
difference.
that good in Three Houses? I mean, that's
I mean,
that's the thing.
They were good
Three
enough for
Houses is no
me.
fucking Persona or anything. It's
No.
not. But like you're not. Like I've never really cared about the characters in a Fire Emblem game except maybe kind of Three Houses, and here I definitely don't. But
It's
the
still
thing
cool,
is
like cutscenes and stuff, right?
but here's the thing, and again, I'm not trying to sell you on this game. I think you should avoid it. There are
I
going to
mean,
be
I'm probably
some
gonna play
there
this
are
when it
going to
goes
be
on
some
sale.
people who have played a lot of Fire Emblem games like myself who like to see the characters the legacy characters from the previous games, like Marth, like like Lynn from Fire Emblem, Blazing Sword, like fucking I just got Celica from Echoes or whatever. And like these are Fire Emblem games I played, and these are the main characters or like cool characters, and I like those characters, but like the character legacy of the series like is really not like it's not as much of a hook to me as maybe they think it is, because like honestly it's not like Marth is some awesome fucking character. He's just in everything. He was in Smash Brothers, but it's not like I don't really care that he's in this game as my fucking stand or whatever. It's just
Maybe the
doesn't
story isn't really the deal
it's not
breaker.
doing
Maybe
it for me. And it's also,
maybe,
but I also didn't play Heroes because I didn't want to care about rolling for these, playing this gotcha game and getting all these legacy characters. I didn't care about them there either. They're not like deep characters. There's no character development. None of them are interesting. Not even in Three Houses. So who cares that they're all in this one?
So maybe the story, maybe the quote unquote step backward is of the story and characters is not the deal breaker that I was kind of worried it would be.
It would be for you, but I don't think it is for like people who started playing Fire Emblem with Fire Emblem 7 on the GBA. It's like honestly, you let me be honest. Like, can we be honest here? Like, I think the character models are nice, and did you see the Pegasus lady flying around?
Yeah,
like,
dude, this footage looks pretty cool.
She's good looking.
Was that look over your shoulder checking for your wife? Is
so
that
like maybe her supports suck, or her how she's tied into the main story doesn't matter or is stupid, but like she's cool to look at in battle, and maybe that's all I need from a Fire Emblem character. So like, who gives a shit?
You know what, Brad? Maybe that's all I need too.
I rolled with in Three Houses. Everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so attached to my class." I did not. I rolled with all ladies in three. I stole all of the different ladies from all the other classes, and when I went into battle, the ones that were not ladies that were in my own class, I benched them. I never used them. I just used all the cool hot ladies and from different classes, and that was my party. And because I don't give a shit about the character development, the supports, even in Three Houses, were never that good. So like.
Dude, the class thing is like just a carryover from Harry Potter. Like everybody is obsessed with which house you're in, whatever, and that's what they were going for in Three Houses.
That's like not even like.
You're right.
Classroom identity wasn't even that deep.
You're right, but people see it, and they make the connection, and they're like, oh, this is cool. I'm here for this.
I was Golden Deer. Which Harry Potter class?
Golden Deer
is Golden Deer.
I guess that would be closest to Gryffindor. Yeah.
Gryffindor? Okay.
Probably because of the colors.
Who gives a shit was the answer.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm having fun. I feel like I'm being challenged. I feel like I'm being engaged tactically. I don't care about Marth. I don't care about the story. Honestly, I'm in this kind of there's some of those cutscenes hitting that button, but I'm still kind of following along. I just want to see cool animations and big boobs and stuff. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that last part, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, you don't mean that last part, but Nick's going to keep it in. I have a question though.
Well, of course I'm going to keep it in.
Yeah. So like,
go ahead.
I mentioned last year that this might be my first Fire Emblem. Should I try it, or should I?
You people like y'all keep jumping on board after the big event, like one that everybody plays, and I don't.
Hey, it's only on this podcast could Brad spend 30 minutes talking about this game that he genuinely likes. Then when two other people on the show are like, maybe I should try it, Brad's like, no, what are you doing?
Because this is what I'm talking about. Just because I'm you guys are not like me. All they played last year.
That's entirely true.
Like tactical games,
Brad, listen, hear me out, bro. This is a podcast. We're all friends here. We're talking about games. Is it not at least the least bit exciting to be like, hey, maybe I can get some friends to try things that are outside of their comfort zone, see if they like it?
How do you think? I was enthusiastic about Three Houses, and I was telling y'all to play Three Houses.
I did play. I mean, I still plan to finish Three Houses.
Honestly, if you can't get through Three Houses, no Fire Emblem game is for you, Nick. It's just not your series.
Okay, all right, there we go.
Probably not your genre.
You just issued an official challenge. I'm not even gonna consider picking up Engage until I get through Three Houses.
You know which one I told you to play? You know which one I told you to play? Play Midnight Suns. I think you'll like Midnight Suns.
Here, listen to me.
You're
Listen to
looking
me.
at this fucking red,
Listen,
blue, Aquafresh looking chick,
listen,
and you're telling me
listen
that
to me.
Midnight Suns is not appealing to you?
It's not Aquafresh. Listen to me though.
Yeah, she's a toothpaste
Uh,
waifu. We know that.
she is a toothpaste. I don't think it's Aquafresh
There's
though.
no
I think it's like
waifus in this.
I think it's like Colgate or something. Anyways, the point is, um, Midnight Suns mechanically sounds cool. I am so not in a Marvel mode right now. Like I can't bring myself to be excited about it. Maybe one day the mood will strike me and I'll be like, I feel like something Marvel related right now, but it is just not in the cards right now. So that's probably not something I'm going to be visiting anytime soon. But you're right. I shouldn't even consider this until I play Three
You
Houses and get through it. So I'm going to
No,
move
don't play
Three
Three Houses either.
I'm moving Three Houses up. It's done. It's too late, Brad. You've moved it up to the top of my backlog.
This
We need to move on.
I'm gonna
Damn it.
fucking rant about this shit later. You guys are Fire Emblem is like so fucking old and like stuck in the past. That's why shit's not for y'all, man. Like,
But dude, I love doing this podcast because it gets me excited to play shit I never would get excited to play. Like this is what
yeah.
I thrive on this shit. Even if I play this and I hate it,
Am I going to be
thrive on the
alive by the time that
thrive
you
on the
actually play
possibility.
13 Sentinels, Nick?
Remember
I need to
Valkyria
know.
Chronicles?
Yes.
Do y'all
Yes, you
remember
will still
Valkyria
be
Chronicles?
breathing.
Y'all remember Valkyria Chronicles?
Yes, Brad, I love Valkyria
All y'all
Chronicles.
played it. All of y'all liked it.
Yeah.
It was our
This-
unanimous game of the year that year. That's never happened
Okay.
before in this
You know,
podcast.
I'm gonna
except
save.
for
I'm gonna save my
maybe.
rant.
Yes, you should say it. We
I'm
need to
gonna
move
save my
on.
rant.
I want to switch gears. I want to talk about Forspoken. Chris Davis, you played some. Brad, you played a little bit. But I want to, again, stress this to you guys. If you wait a week to really dive into it, I can I can help you with this conversation.
Okay. All
Or be
right.
part of it. So, but with that said, I do want to hear what your initial thoughts are. Because this was my draft pick.
Okay.
I put this back in the gameplay envelope after playing a few hours of it, and I sent it back to gameplay.
But you played a few hours of it, and that's
and
you
it
gave
is
it
not for what people think it is. A
You
lot of
gave it
people
an
think
honest
that
try.
like, oh, people who dislike this game or think like the writing and the characters are really cringe, and that's why
I
they don't
do
like the
I
game.
do
But honestly, that's like the least of my issues with this game.
Yeah.
I do want to encourage people if they're genuinely curious because one, obviously listen to what we're going to talk about tonight because now that Chris Davis has played a large chunk of it, but like if you go back and listen to my impressions of that demo, I had a lot of concerns about the game, but I also came out much more positive about it after having played it. It was more of just I was taking a bit of a gamble because part of me was like, is this just a situation where a game like this doesn't demo well because there are a lot of systems, and I'm not sure if that's the case. But that demo actually got me kind of hyped for it. So that pick did come from the heart. I was really hoping that there was going to be enough there to give me at least a couple
If this
points.
game bums you out, it's going to be in ways you're probably not expecting.
All right, consider me intrigued. Chris Davis, where do you stand right now with Forspoken?
I like parts of it, and other parts of it, I'm like, why did they do this? This is a bad idea.
I feel like that's. I
mean,
yeah,
but
I think that's apparent.
it's not about the parts that I don't feel are not things necessarily like the voice acting or the writing. You know, they could be better, but I have heard much worse.
Oh, but come on, the writing could be a lot fucking better.
Oh, of course it could be, but and I have heard so much worse. So like, maybe I had just a little bit higher tolerance than some people.
I do think people are kind of latching onto that particular aspect of this game, maybe a little too obsessively.
Yeah, it's memeing a lot of it.
Well,
too,
it's the cringe stuff, right? But like, you know what surprised me after spending a few hours with this game? Frey is not even the one I dislike. I think Frey is fine.
It's
the main character.
Yeah, Cuff is a shit character, and he's what's mucking everything up. He's awful. He's like a bad Wheatley from Portal 2. Or wait, what was the comparison? He was like
the book
Wheatley
from Nier.
Yeah, he's like Grimoire. He's like a shitty version
like
of Grimoire
Weiss,
Vice meets Wheatley from Portal 2. His jokes are bad, his writing's bad, his acting's bad, and he's just a shitty character who's honestly just a bummer. And it's like Frey is fine, but like she's stuck with this crappy character, and I
Yeah,
think it's really dragging it down.
You empathize more with Frey than you do with Cuff, because Cuff
You mean you
just
only
comes out
empathize with Frey?
dismissive, and often combative against your main character, which in turn
not in
makes
a
Frey
charming or
combative
funny way,
against
right?
him. So
He doesn't have the charm of Vice, and he doesn't have
No, he
the
doesn't.
humor of Wheatley. He's just
Yeah.
bad.
There's
here's my question, because I don't want to spend too much time talking about the character voices, because that's what everyone's obsessing about. But are there any, and preface this by saying this is obviously subjective and open to debate, but like for you, Chris Davis, have there been any narrative hooks up front that seem interesting, that like might make this 50 to 100 hour journey worthwhile?
Well, this is definitely not a 50 to 100 hour journey. I think it's
I've
I
seen
think it's
people
like sub
tweeting
40.
about this game. I see people saying, I saw somebody on Twitter saying, I just broke 100 hours in this game. And obviously that person...
I saw someone say they finished in 15.
Well, these are probably the difference between people mainlining the story and people who are... I played Days Gone for like 80 hours.
Yeah,
so like, and I know you can beat that. You can beat that game in 15 to 20 hours.
Really?
But
yeah, but you gotta mainline that shit though.
This is just stereotypical open world stuff. You can mainline the shit out of the story, not do anything else, and beat it in 15 to 20 hours. I feel like that's
but
pretty.
I don't think this is like
average.
The Witcher 3. I don't think you're like exploring the lands, finding like interesting side quests and stuff.
No,
I think it's more like an Ubisoft sort of thing. But not even that, because I feel like that's almost an insult to like Ubisoft. I don't think that this world is okay. How much have you played of this game, Chris Davis? Honestly?
I've put 7 hours into it.
Okay, so what's out in that world?
So far, it's just empty towns and villages. It's areas with a bunch of enemies. You find puzzle dungeons. Find
that
like
sounds like a
dungeons.
lot. Like tell me what a puzzle dungeon is like.
So there are these labyrinths that you can find throughout the map, that when you go into them, it's basically, I mean, the first ones are pretty basic. They're just basically go into a combat arena and move between combat arenas. But I mean, they started
maze.
One sec. And so you get to the final boss, and it's some of the bosses are more puzzly in how you have to approach combat to them. So here's the thing. I need to talk about the combat real quick.
Okay.
The combat, there are parts of it I really like, and then there's parts that I just don't understand why they're not there. I absolutely love how fast the game flows, the dodging, you're rounding up your counterattacks, and you're just evading enemies and stuff like that. I love that. It feels so cool how fast and easy it is to do.
That was my biggest takeaway from the demo, because, and also they were kind of dishing out like later level spells to give you a taste for that kind of stuff, and some of those things were really fucking cool.
Yeah.
And then also traversal, because this world is so big, because the traversal is super fast, super vertical.
We'll get to that in a second. Yeah. But with the combat, the thing is that this game feels like Infamous 1 from Sucker Punch, where it is a third-person shooter but unlike Infamous, there's no melee aspect. And all of the enemies, especially in the early game, I mean, if there is, I have not encountered it after 7 hours.
Yeah, I know, but it's in the demo. That stuff's in the demo.
Okay, well then it gives you a bad taste for what to expect for the first... I guess the first several acts of the game.
That's what I was kind of hinting at when I played the demo. I was like, it feels like maybe I shouldn't, like, I was like, this can't demo well, because this feels like they dropped me into the middle of it. And I was like this is not going to be representative of like the first however many fucking hours of this game.
No, it'll be Life is Strange at first, because you're in the real world, or you're in modern times, running from a gang or something. It's pretty stupid.
It's weird.
Hey, that's the kind of thing that I'm like, that's the narrative hook I'm talking about. Like, do they do anything interesting with the going back?
Bad. Because the writing is so bad. It's,
I disagree. I think there's
especially at the beginning.
potential.
Wait, we first of all, we don't need to delve into that because Brad, especially Brad and myself, and Brad and Chris Davis, we have always not, we've never seen eye to eye as to like what constitutes good and bad in story. And Brad
Bad
skips half the
dialogue
cutscenes
writing.
and half the games that he watched or that he plays. So
I don't. That's a
You
fucking
do.
misconception, and I
You do.
appreciate if you don't actually say that shit. I watch the crap. I just not as invested. But me
my
not
point is
being engaged in
the-
cutscenes doesn't mean I'm like a bad judge of what makes a good
I
fucking
didn't. Okay,
scene or writing.
calm
Deborah
down, Brad.
Wilson's in this game. Did you know that?
No, I don't know who
Yeah,
Deborah Wilson.
and she's fucking bad. Do you know what that means? That means there's really bad like voice direction, like cast direction in this.
Deborah Wilson, you gotta give me some context here.
Deborah
I don't know who
Wilson's
that is.
been great in lots of games. Like,
Okay, can you name
Pause.
a game that she's been in so I know what the
Pause
fuck you're
real quick.
talking about?
yeah, fucking Jedi Fallen Order, Wolfenstein, the New Order.
Okay. That's all I was trying. I don't know who you were talking about. Sorry, Chris Davis. We
But
hijacked
you know
your
who I'm
conversation.
talking about, right?
Yes,
Like, she's great, right?
I'm
Here-
just saying the things that are often introduced as narrative hooks that get me excited are almost never the things that you enjoy. You almost always
but
say
you
that's
still like
stupid, and I'm
good
like that's
shit.
the kind of shit that I'm into. But whatever. That's because it's subjective.
I
Chris
hope
Davis.
you enjoy your time.
Back to you, Chris Davis. Sorry.
Thank you. I wanted to show off something real quick, but we talked over it.
Oh.
So I think the combat, at least the early game combat, before you get your second power set, I like aspects of it. It just has balance issues because a lot of the enemies that you will encounter on the map, like they don't do level scaling based on where the story is going. So you encounter a lot of enemies that are resistant to your attacks. So it takes quite a while to actually finish off certain sets of enemies. And then there are mid
telling you
bosses
to
that are
not go
just
there?
Huh?
Is that like their way of like gating you off from certain
No,
areas, or
no, it's just they're out there. There's no rhyme or reason to why they're there, to gate your progression or anything like that. You come across them and they're tough to defeat because they're resistant to your magic and you can't do anything about it. You can power through and eventually kill them, but there are just some enemies that are specifically designed to just make you play with another play set of spells, and you just don't have that. So you just have to usually have to run for the fight, which is annoying. But like I love the traversal in this game. It feels so good to be doing the magic parkour stuff. I will say it's a little sticky. It does kind of feel. It reminds me of the growing pains of the first Assassin's Creed or the first Watch Dogs, where you're mantling and you're climbing on buildings and stuff like that. But
it took them like 2 or 3 games to really get to really kind of like hone that feel.
Exactly.
Make it feel nice. Yeah.
When you hit a wall, you can climb a little bit and you have to kind of mountain goat it to get where you want to go sometimes. The problem is that the game prioritizes this recruitment system to where it'll keep going long after you've stopped hitting the button. It just lets the acceleration momentum keep
it's
going.
a little choppy, and we're not really understanding you, Chris Davis.
Some of your I don't know if chat is having this issue, but I can't hear your. Okay, yeah, I guess chat's here. You sound a little like a robot there. So
okay.
It'll probably be fine in the audio, but
Yeah.
on the live stream, it's
testing 1 2. Is that good now?
Yeah, you're better. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. Maybe it was my aggravation kicking in. I was talking about the magic parkour system, to where it is a degradation in combat sometimes because the game emphasizes its completion over actual combat. So it will only stop usually, especially if you hit a wall or something like that, well after you stop doing the button press. So
it's like a what's the it like lingers for us. Like when you let off the control, you stop telling it to do something. It has to like fully play out. It carries that momentum forward to its logical conclusion, whether you want to stop and it doesn't stop on a dime. Is what you're saying.
It absolutely does not, and that
Prioritizes animation over good feeling.
It prioritizes animation, and that can be a real detriment in environments with a lot of obstacles and stuff like that. Like if you're fighting in a village, like where I'm going to fight in a minute, the game just feels a little rough to control sometimes. And especially the other big problem with the combat is that the camera lock-on system is so finicky to use.
Yeah.
Half the time it doesn't want to let you lock onto an enemy, and half the time when you even remotely move your right stick to even try and kind of adjust your angle, it disengages.
They're supposed to patch that to make
Yeah.
that not as annoying, because that was one of the big complaints from the demo.
Well, they haven't patched it yet, and I really, really, really would like them to, because
And I still
just
can't see shit in this game either. I don't know about you. I was excited to see an accessibility menu where you can make
Like-
it to where like enemies and stuff are more visible,
Or
but it's not
items.
like done elegantly like a Sony game. It's like trash, right? So if you turn it on, you just see a bunch of white globs everywhere, and you're like, "Well, I can't play a game like this." But then I turn it back off, and I'm like, "I can't see
Are you
anything."
talking about like enemies kind of blending in with grass and stuff?
Remember that first boss fight with that dragon, Chris
Yeah.
Davis?
yeah.
I couldn't see shit in that fight. Maybe it was because it was dark and the dragon was dark, or what, but like, what a clusterfuck. This was one of the reasons I gave up on this game, because like it might be nice to have all these cool spells or whatever, but like when I can't see shit and the camera's bad, like I'm just not having any fun.
I mean, I can understand that. Like I mean, that dragon boss fight to start the game with, you're also in the middle of like a storm with a lot of fog and stuff kind of like bearing down on you. I think it's specifically designed to like pitch a bad scenario to the player. Like if you go to an area with a lot of fog and this stuff, that means you're probably going to run into higher level enemies that you'll have to deal with.
It's gonna be a dumb question, but could it be a like a contrast issue if you weren't playing on like a 4K TV or something?
That
Like,
might
I don't-
exacerbate it just a
This was
little.
at night. I just think nighttime looks bad, and I think if there's too much foliage as well, you're gonna have a hard time seeing things. Now, if it's daytime and you're like in this town or whatever, like you are now, sure you can see shit, but you get into like situations and environments where it's really kind of hard to follow combat. But
So
it's not always like that.
Yeah.
so in the interest of time,
In the interest
Chris
of
Davis,
time.
what else do you want to say about this tonight? Knowing that we're probably going to talk about it again in the coming weeks.
I wanted to mention probably the thing that's aggravating people the most about the game is
I know what you're about to say. I know what you're about.
when you are.
It's that the game freezes you in place all the time.
No, that's not it.
Pet peeve.
That's
I
not the
hate it.
problem. The problem is the game's pacing when you're outside of exploring the open world. Because when you go to Scipia, the last human city in the world, which is basically your hub area for interacting with civilians, the game takes away your parkour powers. So you can sprint, but you don't have nearly the level of maneuverability that you have in the rest of the game. And
Which is a problem, because that's like the best part of the game, and that's what...
Well, what makes
know
it
what I
worse is that these environments feel specifically designed for that parkour movement system, because they're large and open and sprawling, and it feels like I'm not running down thin alleyways, which would make sense for like a urban environment. These are big avenues and big squares and circles to explore.
Like in the city?
Yeah, it almost feels like at one point that was the plan to have it activated, and they turned it off somewhere in development, and it doesn't make sense.
Weird.
And
so does it make like traversing the cities like a slog? Is that what you're saying?
It does feel, especially based on the pacing of the side quests, the quote unquote detours that you find, and how they somehow handle dialogue in the game just feels weird. In fact, with all the writing that Frey encounters throughout the game, if it's not a scene in which the game takes control of the camera away from you and it's doing like panning shots of people walking and stuff, it's Frey standing in one spot. You can't move the camera, and you can't do anything. It's just still shots. It's like
it's jarring.
It's not jarring. It's just because
old.
It feels old. It feels like
go.
a generation
Period.
and a half, 2 generations old.
Yeah, they definitely don't have the cinematic like flair, like in their conversation engine, or maybe they don't even have a conversation engine like some games do at this point.
Early on in the game, you're getting into conversations with Cuff a lot early on, right? I mean, throughout the whole game, but
Yeah,
early on in the game where he's kind of setting up things, like the game will freeze you in place so he can talk to you, and it feels like dialogue that should just happen while you're moving around the world, and you
exactly.
can't move at all, and it's like it feels so sluggish, so old. Like it makes the pace feel bad. It makes the game feel bad to play. It's like just let me move while you're talking to me because like this shit ain't even that good. You're just it's maddening, and it doesn't feel
It's
it
it
doesn't
sounds
feel
like
like an expensive production. It
Well,
feels
well,
it sounds like they probably would have gotten some of those points back if they had just made a simple change like that, where it's like letting those conversations not interrupt the flow
well,
of gameplay.
the problem. I'll tell you what the real problem with those. Then I think this is what everyone will eventually realize is that those moments where the game pauses and freezes you in place and forces you to have a conversation with Cuff, those conversations are not in depth. They're characters. Character one says something, character two says something, character one reacts, and that's the end of the conversation. There is no narrative depth to what's going on for me to really appreciate the moment. So
No complexity in the setup.
yeah,
Or
there's
the
no complexity. It's Freya asking a question or responding to Cuff, and then one or the other replying to that, and usually that's it. There's nothing else, and you move on to the next conversation topic that you had to pick from. It feels like this isn't even like last gen. This is the gen before that in that kind of design. I would honestly say that this is Square Enix trying to pick up on the Far Cry, fame and those open world Ubisoft style games, and just
seems
not
apparent, yeah.
taking notes from like the modern contemporaries in the best of ways.
In
They
that
found
genre,
a
yeah.
really cool
Ghostwire
mechanic.
Tokyo felt like it was making those same mistakes. Like they're just sort of they really wanted to make that sort of open world game and they're not quite getting it, or they don't realize how much we don't want that, but they're a little late to that party. And
I don't think it's that, because I do think there are people that want these kinds of games, but they don't want them to feel like they've taken steps backwards in
or they don't want them
time.
to feel old, they don't want them to feel uninspired. But I feel like the implementation
if you're going to do a game in this genre, there are just certain things you can't do anymore. Like
Yeah.
if you don't want it to be picked apart and shit on, like there's just certain things that you have to do right, and it sounds like this game kind of fails. But
yeah,
like I
Square
said,
Enix does. They want to do this. They had a really cool mechanic that they wanted to base the game around, but they couldn't find out how to properly handle extra content and side stuff to do that doesn't
it seems like
feel
first
like a
time
checklist.
it seems like the first time this team this team of developers has made a game like this.
I think this is the first time the publishers tried doing this.
no.
Really,
Okay,
These are the Final Fantasy 15 people.
okay. I totally regret making that last comment, because we need to move on. We're gonna
Okay.
talk about this game in the coming weeks, and I would like to have some more hands-on time with it, so I could actually, not be talking out my ass about it.
Okay.
can I mention one last thing?
What
real
if this is
quick?
the last time we hear about it? What if you hate it and don't even want to talk about it?
Then I'll say that, and we won't talk about it. But I'm
won't
gonna
talk
play it. Go ahead, Chris Davis.
One last
Final
thing I
thought.
want to mention real quick. The fast travel and the loading in this game is kind of fucking incredible. It loads so fast. Like it literally the game fades out and immediately fades back up at this location that's completely across the map.
That is one of the things that they were showing off like ages ago, as far as technology. Like when they were first showing this engine off, like that was one of the main features they were bragging about.
And
So,
if there's
doesn't
anything
surprise
they
me.
have to take away from this game, it's that they gotta keep that for their future games. That is just it felt mind-boggling, honestly.
I mean,
I had to do
this
it a
is
couple times
also-
back and forth to confirm it.
But I mean, this is also the first time we're seeing this engine on the PS5, and the PS5, when you make games specifically for the PS5 or for high-end PCs. Like we're getting to a point in time where we can start expecting that to be more of a regular thing, hopefully. All right, so I kind of wanted to round out this show tonight by talking about we had some surprise news yesterday during the Xbox Developer Showcase or whatever you want to call it, or whatever they called it, and Tango Gameworks shadow dropped their new game. Obviously, Tango Gameworks being the team behind Evil Within 1, Evil Within 2, and last year's Ghostwire Tokyo. And I think, especially following the kind of critical and sales, I don't want to call it a failure necessarily. Maybe it's a failure. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think Ghostwire Tokyo left the kind of the future of Tango in kind of not a great place. Or at least it felt maybe not like that. And then they shadow dropped Hi-Fi Rush.
Well, I mean,
And
the thing
I
about
want to talk
Ghostwire
about the
Tokyo is
game.
most
I want
people
to talk
are-
about the game, but I also want to talk about what this kind of signifies for Tango Gameworks, because it's very kind of unlike anything that the studio has done before. So, Brad, I think you've probably played more of this than Chris Davis and I have at this point.
how much have y'all played?
I've
Through the
only
first
played
level.
the first level. So I
So
did
you beat the first boss?
Yes.
Yes, I did. I beat the first
Okay,
boss,
I haven't
which is
played much
basically a
more than that.
tutorial.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
like the next level, like right after. So
Yeah. So
Yeah.
well,
Well,
let's start by
sorry.
saying this game is fucking cool.
They made a music and rhythm action game, kind of like last year's. What was your shooter? Metal shooter.
Metal Hellsinger.
Yeah.
It's like a Metal Hellsinger, but like instead it's
Character action
a
game.
melee action game with sort of a Saturday morning cartoon aesthetic. And I think one of the big strengths of the game is that aesthetic. Like I was surprised by
It's
like the
gorgeous.
presentation.
Dude.
At first I was like, what is this art style? And I think I was mostly in shock because I wasn't expecting, like this is not
Something
really
so
what I
bright.
wanted from Tango Gameworks. Not just that, but this is the director of the Evil Within 2. So coming from like that and their history that of games that like Mikami and stuff's worked on, it's like this looks kind of like goofy, and it's not. In trailer form, when I first saw it, I was like, this is unappealing. I don't want this.
You know
But
what?
when
You know
when
what?
I booted it up, I was surprised by by the presentation. Like this seems like a really polished. Like the animations are good. Like
It's like Sunset Overdrive.
Yeah, but that was a little yeah.
I'm not talking about like from a design standpoint. I'm just talking about like
no,
if you
of
want to
course.
compare it visually to something, just like in terms of its color palette and the
Liveliness.
vibrancy of it, the liveliness of it.
I guess yeah. It's very colorful, and it's very. But like the humor and tone's a little bit different. Again, I'd say it's
Oh
more
yeah,
like
yeah.
Saturday morning cartoon than anything like Sunset Overdrive. And like that stuff is good. Like I was kind of surprised. It's kind of like corny, but in a way that stuff sort of is supposed to be. Like I feel like it's skewing a little younger. Like this is one that I'll definitely be playing in front of
It was
Henry, but like they're pretty good at that, and it's charming.
Dude, I am so my first thought when I watched the trailer for this, and I was like, for lack of a better way of describing this, I was like, oh, they could have done anything in the world, and they just made this like boring white guy as like the main character or whatever. And then I booted the game up and started playing it, and I was like, okay, they kind of nailed the character.
A white guy.
I am a boring white guy. Which I was like, they could have made anything, and they went with a boring white guy. But like, they ended up making this character that has this like really quirky, fun personality. He's a dude who's basically goes into this he volunteers for this program that's going to make him like a bionic dude, I guess, because I'm not really sure what backstory they're going into here, but like he's obsessed with music, so he's walking around with his iPod, and he goes in to get like this like bionic arm, and an accident happens, and his iPod gets like fused with his body, and now everything in the world is like being affected by the beat of his music playing in his iPod, which is weird when you say it out loud, I suppose.
No, I mean,
but like the execution of it's cool.
Charming. It's a cartoon. It's like a fucking cartoon, and I feel like a lot of the animations and stuff are like they capture that well, which is sort of what I wasn't expecting. Honestly, I don't think of like Tango Gameworks when I think of like really polished and like, nice animations and stuff. But here it seems like this seems like a very well put together game, which is shocking because they announced it and released it on the same day. And I know that is sort of tangential to like the quality of the actual game and what we're talking about here, but I feel like a lot of people are kind of riding high from that. Like a shadow drop is really exciting. A shadow drop from a developer that people are kind of interested in, like Tango Gameworks, is exciting. And a shadow drop from Xbox, when they haven't been releasing shit, it feels like, for quite some time, is like, good vibes. Like, oh, not only do they finally have a new game, but it's out today. That's exciting, right?
I don't know
Why
if I'm
they
alone
didn't tell
on.
people about this game might be a little strange,
Yeah,
but
yeah. My first reaction to hearing it was the shadow drop was I kind of like my brain jumped to like,
this is
okay,
going to
well
be
this
mediocre.
is like, yeah, this is going to be either
Yeah, it's a
mediocre
Like
or
they're
small
putting it down.
mediocre game.
it's going to be like some side project that isn't like very well thought out, or is not, it was never intended to be some
Exactly.
big success.
Exactly,
So
which
like,
turned this thing into a surprise. It turned this thing into a surprise because I was thinking the exact same thing. Because I feel like any game that's ever been announced and shadow dropped at the same time, there's been some indie game that people are just end up giving like a 71 and move on with their lives and no one really plays. Like that happens, and that's usually warrants like the lack of a or a marketing campaign, right? But like here, this is a game that actually, I think it was perfect. I feel like if they were talking about this game for months before people got their hands on it, people would be like, "What is this shit?" But
yeah, Ninja Theory multiplayer game.
people were so energized by the shadow drop, by the fact that Microsoft finally has something, by that it was on Game Pass and stuff, that everybody went out and played it and everybody talked about it. And like the vibes for this are riding high. This is a game that when it finally is start getting scores are going to be very high. Now, is this really a 10 out of 10? I don't know. Like, I think maybe it's a little too easy. Maybe the combat really it doesn't feel that deep. It feels good, musically. It feels good to like kind of hit stuff to the beat. But I saw some people saying like I just mash buttons and I've been getting higher scores than when I am actually trying. And I kind of feel that like, but at the same time, like with along with the personality and the presentation of the game and the characters itself, combined with the energy of the moment of the shadow drop, like I think people are going to be riding this one high all year.
I
I think it's going
I
to score well, and I think people are really have endeared themselves to this game in the same way that I think the character is very endearing.
Yeah.
Like it's just this is a good vibes game and a good vibes moment, and
if
yeah.
people can just avoid forgetting about this because it's the January release.
No, no,
I
no,
think,
no,
no, no,
no.
what I'm saying is, I think this could be a serious, like, this will come up in Game of the Year conversations later, potentially. Like,
Yeah.
I'm saying this as someone who's only played the first level, but like the potential is certainly there. And I'm also thinking about my recent history, obviously with Ghostwire Tokyo, and how I was so incredibly bummed out about how that game affected me. This game has already appealed to me on a much deeper level than Ghostwire ever did,
Oh,
and
it's so
I was,
tragic.
and
If you
it's
finish Forspoken, I'm gonna fight you.
So the thing about a rhythm game, let alone the rhythm action game, is that the high games, the really high quality games, they feel existentially good. The boring or mediocre experiences feel abysmally bad, and this is a very very good experience. We haven't actually talked about what this combat is, and I think
well,
we need to talk about it.
I think
Oh,
one of the
it's
distinguishing factors for this as a rhythm game, um, is that like a lot of rhythm games, they put the onus on the character to hit the beat, and if you don't hit the beat, everything sounds fucked up.
Yeah,
This,
but
they don't
in
interrupt the beat. When you can mash buttons, you will still, like, your hits still land on the beat,
there is no
but
punishment.
there's
but
no
I think that's what's
punishment.
making it too easy, especially because if you mash out the 4-hit combo, you get the finisher no matter whether you're on the beat or not, and it's easy to land to match the timing of the finisher, the circle, which means you can
But
really kind of mash your way to like big damage. You know what I
But it
mean?
Yeah.
scores you. It scores you like Devil May Cry. It gives you like like ratings and whatnot. So like you're only gonna get those like A's and S's if you're actually hitting the beats. but like there is no punishment. And for someone like me, who admittedly I usually struggle hardcore with rhythm
You're
games,
rhythmically
uh,
challenged.
I do not like my ears can't multitask. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm focusing on what's on in front of me. I can't also focus on like hitting
When you're playing a
those
game like
audio
this, are you
cues.
looking at the visuals to try to sync up, or are you trying to listen to the music?
I
Because
think
they
I'm
give you
trying to
so much
listen to the music.
they give you so much visual feedback, but I've never been able to respond to visual feedback in those like sort of like the bar at the bottom or the flashing cat. I can't do it. To me, I have to listen to the music, and I was a little frustrated that I feel like, when you play like Guitar Hero or something, there's a setting in the menu that lets you sort of set the audio video latency, to to your setup.
Yeah.
And this game doesn't do that. When I was playing in my living room, it was through some bootleg. I got a long HDMI cable running through the ceiling or whatever to my living room. I'm playing on my computer, and it's not like the most like I don't know. I feel like there might be a little bit of delay, and I really would like to set that latency. But when I was capturing footage, I was hitting the beat like way more often, and I feel like I wish there was a way to kind of to set that latency so when I play in my living room, it could feel better than maybe it does, which is weird because you see that in almost every music or rhythm game, but it's not here, and I don't really understand why.
Yeah.
It
So
probably just wasn't. I mean, when you start and install the game, like one of the first things is that it talks about that, talking about latency and what you should do to
There's a
adjust
low
this.
latency mode. It's a toggle, and it's like
Yes.
that's not how you handle that.
you can't
Yeah,
tweak it
but the
specifically.
difference here is that this is a developer has never done anything like this before, and you're talking about a developer that's known for making nothing but music games. So like, I give them a little leeway in that regard, you know.
Yeah.
It's not a deal breaker or anything,
But
but
but also like just we were talking about like matching it to the beat and how we do it. I too do it based on the music, but the game just does such a good way so many good ways of actually trying to teach you what the beat is and get you to catch up to it. Again, there is no punishment in this game for staying off the beat with your combat. Um, but it has so many visual cues to get you because
the environment moves to
the
the
world
beat.
and the environment and even the enemies are animating to the beat of the music. And when you're in combat, like when your character always hits on the beat no matter what they do, whatever attack they're doing, it's going to be on that next beat. So if you are off the beat, what you could do is just as soon as your character hits the enemy, press the button again immediately and you're back on the beat and you're doing your combos. Like that feels so good. That is so smart. That is a great idea.
It's very smart. Also, oh god, what was I gonna just point out? Oh, and one other thing I want to give a shout out to this game because it's when you're playing the game, it's using original music and whatnot, but there's also like certain levels or bosses where they have a bunch of like really good licensed music, and I've only played that first level, but in that first level alone, there was a Black Keys song and a Nine Inch Nails song, and like that
The
has me
Nine
excited
Inch
to keep
Nails,
going.
honestly, like the licensed music is there, but like it feels so deconstructed to match
Yeah,
up
it's
with the
not.
base music of the level that it doesn't. This isn't a game that you're gonna have to really worry about Twitch, blocking you if you try to stream
Well,
it.
there is a streamer mode on there because
And they
they do
absolutely do that,
say.
yeah. But what I'm saying
But
is that it matches so well to the base soundtrack that they built that it is a real compliment. Like some of these games, like you don't really want to play like even if you're not streaming, like you don't want to like play that licensed music because sometimes it's just not implemented well. It is so well implemented in this game.
Yeah, it's been really great. I mean, I like the fact that you chose the word deconstructed because that is what it is. Like that Nine Inch Nail song. It's not just playing the Nine Inch Nail song. It's like deconstructed it and layered it over the original music
This is a Devil May
of the
Cry
game.
5 situation, though. Y'all just aren't hearing the whole song because you're bad at this game.
That is, but that no, what? That's not true.
That's not true at all.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. The music never punishes you. It never holds back. I mean, the cool thing about the game is that the music and how the world moves to the beat and how the combat moves to the beat. And if you're not good at music and rhythm games, you're not just going to be missing out on good music. You're just not going to get the higher scores, but you're still going to hear all the music. Like I can play this game, quote unquote, badly and still feel like I'm playing the game and having a good time with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, especially just in terms of like you want to make a game that is fun for people to play. I think making it accessible they found a way to take this genre that can be very 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 skill based, and somehow manages to make it feel accessible while also not alienating people who are really good at music and rhythm games, who are just going to be really on point with everything.
Yeah,
And I think
and it
that's an accomplishment.
and it feels like it's going to continue to grow that stuff. Like we're still Brad's playing stuff from the second level. We just beat the first level, so we don't know what's coming beyond what we're seeing in the footage. But what we
It
do
might
know
suck after this.
from the direct stuff is that you get companion characters that fight alongside you
Yeah.
in combat. And you also get extra tools and new stuff for traversal. So like all the ways that they can use this to match up to the beat and just create this rhythmic soundtrack combat experience. It's actually really exciting. I want to play this game. I want to beat it with the licensed music, and then I immediately want to play it without. Just play through entirely the game without.
I just want to say that I had almost no, like, I watched the trailer and I didn't really feel it, and then I downloaded it and I was like, we're gonna do a show tonight. I have a couple hours before we start. I might as well just download it. It's on Game Pass. Why not try it out? I am now fully on board. I fully intend to play this game. I don't see myself putting it down, and I think that's pretty impressive for a shadow dropped Tango Gameworks game. Now here's the question that maybe we could. Yeah, so here's maybe the question I want to just kind of end this conversation on, which is, so what does this mean for Tango? Because
this was a very good moment for them. I think if this game was announced like months ago, people would be clowning on this shit up until launch, and maybe once it finally releases, some people would play and say, no, it's actually pretty good, but it would have not have been the same as this moment. This is like very good. When I first saw this trailer, I was like, Tango's dead. Because I was thinking about these Microsoft layoffs. I thought this was like, I almost thought this was a mobile game at a first glance.
Brad, I would understand if your immediately thought was to think of Platinum and how their B team was making those Transformer games and stuff like that. Those licensed deals.
Words in my mouth? No. It was more just that this didn't seem like a game that would sell. Basically, like, oh, no one's gonna buy this shit. Who is this for? And
my first thought was
it's still probably not going to set the world on fire in terms of sales. This is probably a small project, but the energy's good now. This is a W for Tango, a dub, and when I'm glad. I don't know if this means we're going to get an Evil Within 3. This is the director of Evil Within 2, which is unfortunate.
Weird.
But
it's weird.
Well, it's unfortunate. Because.
But also, you said it's a smaller project. He could be directing Evil Within 3 and also directing this on the side. You know what I mean? But here's what the first game I thought of when I heard kind of the story of this game and saw like the trailer for it. My first thought was that that random Ninja Theory multiplayer game that they talked about for years, and then it came out and everybody completely forgot about it and it died on the vine. I don't even remember what it was called. Bleeding Edge. I played that at E3, and it's been, and it's,
there's a lot of games like that.
It died on the vine. I assumed this was going to be their Bleeding Edge, and in 24 hours, that story has completely flipped, and now it's like one of the. This seems like it could easily turn out being a highlight of their catalog.
Yeah, people are kind of like talking about it in the same vein they spoke about Pentiment at the end of last year, of like, oh, this is a good reason for Game Pass, because small projects like this can exist. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but it is nice to know that there is something coming out for people who there is stuff coming out that makes Game Pass owners excited, I guess. I don't know what I was gonna say, but it's not. This isn't going to be like some landmark company saving game. It's just sort of a good vibes game, just like Pentiment. And we still need to see some of the big boys, because that, again, we don't have to get into the depth of it, but how much was not at that Microsoft thing was a little bit shocking, because they're still not talking about some of their really big games that have been announced for a very long time.
Well,
we know Starfield is getting an event supposedly later, but no Avowed, no Fable, no Everwild, no Hellblade,
Yeah, but
no State of
you're
Decay 3,
complaining.
no Indiana Jones. Like, what the fuck? I
You
mean,
are
hi-fi's
complaining
cool,
about
but this
something
is
that
not
they will
gonna.
take care of through the next 6 months because they've got E3 coming, okay?
They've been.
And
When was Fable
they
announced?
well in advance of this event, they were televising exactly what was going to be here.
No,
Like
I'm not
they
gonna
have a
buy it because
pacing
Phil
schedule they are
Spencer
working
has
on.
been telling everybody next 6 months for a fucking decade almost at this point, since the Xbox fucking One era. Man, it's bullshit. It's bullshit.
We don't need
They
to
were
argue about this right
completely
now.
Bullshit. We had this
transparent.
conversation a year ago and the year before that, and you're telling me wait another 6 months? Are you crazy?
That's not what
Okay,
I'm saying. I'm saying you
Brad,
are overblowing an event that they clearly televised exactly what was going to be there.
guys, please don't have this conversation on the podcast right now.
No,
Have this in
no,
Discord.
but this is what this podcast. This is what our podcasts are for, to have these
Okay.
conversations.
Okay.
I mean, we've had this conversation time and time again. That's the point.
That's what
People
I'm
keep
saying.
telling me, "Why are you expecting stuff from Xbox? Give them time," you know. And then a pandemic came along, and it's like, well, now we can blame the pandemic, I guess. But they were having issues long before the pandemic, and like, what the fuck? What did Xbox ship last year? It's bad. I just
Can
want to
I
hear about
Go ahead.
Avowed, Fable, some of these like games that appeal to me that, you know,
There it is.
No, I
Well,
mean,
there's what?
I want to mention real quick while we wrap up this conversation, because we do need to move on. This is Mikami was clearly telegraphing in the developer direct that this is not his game. He's easily the EP on it, but he did not direct it. He doesn't seem to
said the
have
same
any
thing
hand
about
on
the
it
last
except to be like the studio face for it.
right.
So that probably means he's working on
obvious-
something.
Obviously, Tango Gameworks is
No, but
working on something
Mikami
else.
has talked about kind of stepping back to be a producer role so these small projects can exist anyways. I don't know if he's directing anything.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying he'd be a
Yeah.
director, but I'm saying he's not an EP because an EP just kind of like stands. Okay, yeah, you can go do that. But a producer like goes in there and is assisting the director.
It's in the trenches, as
yeah,
as
they are
say.
on the ground in the trenches.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like whatever Mikami's working on, it's in progress right now.
For sure. He's not just sitting around twiddling his thumbs.
Y'all not worried about Hellblade 2?
I am
Just
very
out of
worried about
curiosity.
Hellblade 2. I mean,
I'm
well,
not.
no, sorry. I'm not worried about Hellblade 2 because I'm sure the game is coming. I don't think it's like
Not
vaporware
worried.
or anything.
Worried that there's
I'm annoyed that they're dragging their feet, showing us the things that you mentioned, like Everwild. I don't expect to see
because
right
we
now
don't know what that
because
is, even though it's been years.
well,
since it was announced.
specifically because they came out and said that they literally went back to the drawing board in that game. Like
and that was years ago.
they scrapped almost everything they had and they went back to the drawing board. So who the fuck knows if we're ever going to see that game at all? So that one I'm not. But like but things like Fable clearly were announced way too early. Like that.
You're right.
They announced.
I just
Fable
keep thinking about how we heard smoke about Fable from Playground Games before even Forza Horizon 4 came out. I feel like right. It was like 5 years ago, maybe more.
But this shit is happening increasingly. Like 2
saw
days
one
ago
cinematic
is the
trailer.
4-year anniversary of the announcement of the completely reworking of Metroid Prime 4. And where the fuck is that?
Yeah, you don't think I'm concerned about that, Chris Davis?
I'm not.
At least Nintendo's shipping games until then. I mean, these are their big games. These are their system sellers, and they are fucking ghost. I mean, sure, they still talk about Forza, thank God. Halo is out now, I guess. That's finally got finished. These are the exciting ones to me, especially. Like Avowed, maybe that one wasn't announced too long ago. It's still been, I mean, how long has it been on Avowed? But like
2
this
years.
is Obsidian. They ship games. Like show
after
me
the
what
things
this one's all about, because this one is like super exciting. right?
out of the things that you mentioned, or the games that you specifically mentioned, Avowed seems like the one that is maybe the most realistic to expect soon. I feel like
So show it.
Fable at this point needs to be shown. Like they need to show us something, or I'm just going to
2
assume
years ago
they
they needed to
quietly
show it,
canceled
but
it.
yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, I didn't even finish my
This is
list.
the, I mean,
Y'all were like, stop. You know, Indiana Jones. When are they gonna finally give us a little more on that? Like, this is potentially exciting stuff that they're not even. What I'm saying is they're not even doing like the EA thing, right? Where they have like some developers. Oh, you know, we're working on this game. Here's a helmet. You know, like they're
they've
giving
been
us
doing
nothing. They're not even like saying these projects exist, and that part is weird.
they've been doing interviews and stuff and talking a lot about the Silent Hill 2 remake, and I was like, I thought the Silent Hill 2 remake would be one of those things that they announced and then we don't hear about again for a year, but they've already done like several
This is what I'm
big
talking about. It's
like
unusual.
even though
State
we
of
haven't
Decay
seen a
3, they
second of
announced
gameplay.
State of Decay 3 years ago, and they have said nothing since then.
Yeah. So there is clearly a problem, and it is one of those things. Like if they start showing these things, I think the optimism will obviously start rising. But they need to show us something.
I think they're
Um,
going to, because the
they
day the
better.
direct happened, they also announced their E3 plans, and it was also announced that they're going to have a press event for Starfield in early March. So
Wait,
they've
did
got
they
their
actually
engine
give
started.
specific details on that? Because I thought the company line was like, we're working on something. It wasn't like a fucking date, you know, which I feel like this is a game that's supposed to launch in the first half of the year. They should have a fucking date for a big Starfield event, and it should be probably sooner rather than later, right? You're
Like,
telling me that there's a maybe non-dated event in March for a game that's supposed to come out a couple months after, and we've seen
press
what
events
on?
happen all the time without announcing when they
This
are.
is the kind of minutia of the conversation I don't think we should have, because we're just going to argue about when they should announce a date, which is not particularly interesting. They
Well, I'm
need.
just saying, if the game really is coming out in the next few months, to be honest, then it's time to,
Yeah.
you know.
God, what if they're thinking about pushing it?
No, I think they are going to push it. I think there's no way this game doesn't come out this
Y-
fall, winter.
And you know
instead.
what? Let them push it. We get Redfall on May 2nd. That leads
We didn't talk about
directly into
Redfall. What did y'all think
Zelda.
of Redfall?
I haven't watched the footage of Redfall yet. I haven't had a chance.
Oh,
Um,
what are you doing sitting in the airport but not watching Redfall footage? Come on,
Honestly, that Redfall footage, I've always been kind of like, I wouldn't say mid, but not hyped for Redfall. This has sold me on the game. Like,
Oh wow, yeah, this
it has some issues to it. I think that combat needs a little bit more feedback from the enemies. And I wish the weapons actually, felt like they were more useful than just, fire 3 shots and then have to reload. But the variety of weapons, the variety of activities that they got going, and just that arcane level design just built into an open world is pretty exciting to me.
But it's funny because you're talking about a game that they've described in interviews and articles, but I thought when they showed this off again, which they did, it was going to look more like a arcane game, and I feel like what I saw was more of like what I was worried that this was going to be, something a little bit more like a Destiny or like a Left 4 Dead or something.
Well, the good thing about this presentation about Redfall was that most of it was single player, and they were talking a lot of, you can play this single player, you can do this alone, you don't need to play.
They
it
were
with
saying
people.
that, but all the hooks and systems they were showing looked very like multiplayer.
There's
Co-op games as a
complementary like
service stuff.
skills specifically built for your compadres when you're fighting.
That's not what I mean, but we can move on.
Padres.
What?
Uh,
I live in
I will-
Texas. What are you talking about?
I will watch that footage and
Yeah,
deliver my.
I'm curious to know what you think, Nick.
I'm curious because I drafted that game, and I want. Can you
That's
sell?
not why you're curious. You're also excited about it. Crispy
Yeah, I
didn't
am
give a shit
excited.
about that game until
No,
he
no, no.
drafted it.
Crispy was upset when I drafted this before him. He's in chat right now calling us
he likes
non-believers.
vampires. That's right. He's one of those.
No, he just
Okay.
he likes
One of
Destiny.
those?
Likes. I don't think it's the vampires thing.
Oh no, is that why? Because
And he likes
Destiny?
Arcane.
No.
He likes Arcane and he likes Destiny.
That's true. We all like Arcane.
I'm the one
Arcane
who
never
likes
misses.
vampires.
Arcane has never missed.
Arcane has missed. Stop it.
Okay,
No,
listen. Everybody listen.
I
Everybody
wanna
shut
hear
your
it.
mouth. Listen.
Shut-
Everybody listen. I love Arcane and I love vampires. I'm the vampire guy. Crispy's the I love Arcane and I love Destiny likes. So one of us is going to be disappointed. I don't know which one. I'm a little scared.
mean-
I'm a little scared.
Didn't Arcane work on Wolfenstein Youngblood? That game was a miss.
They
I think
they
they
co-developed
assisted
that
with it.
with Machine Games. They didn't lead develop on it.
Okay, well, one of them's bad, and they're both your babies. So tell me which one's bad. Is it Arcane or Machine Games? Because that game sucked.
No, I agree. It could have been a lot better, but I felt the Arcane level design that was in there I liked.
Don't
And
take
that's
the bait,
that's
Chris
mainly
Davis.
what Arcane did. So
That's not
Don't
bait.
take-
I'm speaking truth over here, and you know it, Nick.
I never played it. I mean, I played it at E3. I think that's all.
Arcane's good. Arcane's good. Although I feel like people turned on Deathloop a little bit, but you're right. Arcane makes good games.
Remember,
Maybe we should all
this
play
is-
Arx Fatalis.
Remember, this is Arcane
revival
Austin. This is the team that made Prey.
yes,
I mean, sure, but this ain't Prey. But you're right. You're right. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
Just God,
But I'm just saying, I
please.
thought they were going to show I thought this
I
was
just
going to be
want
their
some-
time to show what they've been talking about in articles, and I feel like they said a lot of single player, but what I saw didn't look like it looked like the systems you see in a whatever. Let's move on, please.
All right, let's wrap this show up with the 4-player minute. You know how this works. Deliver your final
Yep.
thoughts, Brad.
I
What
got
are
a
your
rant
final
here.
thoughts?
Fire
Okay,
Emblem
here we go.
rant?
2-part Fire Emblem rant. I didn't really get into it on my Fire Emblem segment, but this is a little bit about the whole waifus. Waifus are what saved Fire Emblem. That's the first part, which I think is bullshit. Everyone attributes Fire Emblem Awakening. So Fire Emblem Awakening did save the series from death. It was gonna die. Even the developer said it was gonna die. Awakening was their last ditch effort. It was a big success and it saved the series. But motherfuckers, it was not because of waifus. It was because they finally spent a little money on the series. Like the game, the last handheld game that they released was a remake, or it was Shadow Dragon, and that game looked like fucking ass. Like no one bought that game. No one wanted to play that fucking game. It was poo poo. And then even the 3D games they were doing on the fucking GameCube and the Wii, their 3D animation looked so bad back then. They just seemed like kind of low, like more budget games. But when Awakening came out, it was like a much bigger production. It was the first time where like their 3D stuff started to look really good. There was, a lot more, like the cutscenes looked really nice, and like it was just a much bigger, more expensive production. And I attribute that, and the marketing was like way more significant than it was for any other Fire Emblem game. And I feel like that is what saved the series, not just fucking waifus. The other misconception is that the waifu thing is like the whole relationship simulator of like pairing everybody together, having them be married, having them have children, having those children come from the future to join your team. They only did that in Awakening and Fates. That has been gone from the series since then. It wasn't in Three Houses. Three Houses relationship stuff was like kind of almost non-existent. Same thing for Echoes, and like so people are acting like what's rules really hurting Engage is that stuff going away, but like that stuff sort of died with Fate, so I don't know what people are talking about. The other thing I want to say is just a frustrating thing for me is that, because I think what came up is I brought up Codename Steam, which is an Intelligent Systems original IP that came out for the 3DS. It wasn't Advance Wars and it wasn't Fire Emblem. It was a new IP, and I think it was from the Advance Wars team. But the aesthetic and stuff, like people really didn't vibe with. It didn't click with people. No one wanted to play, an Abraham Lincoln robot, and it was a weird thing, right? But mechanically, systems wise, it was actually like a step forward for the genre. But it was a failure, right? It didn't sell at all, and they just threw the baby out with the bathwater. And I hate that, because I feel like when I'm playing this and I'm like kind of engaged tactically, but like this shit, the mechanically, systems wise, Fire Emblem is so stuck in the past. I just came from playing like Tactics Ogre, which is a game literally from the 90s, and it feels just as advanced as this shit, if not more so, because you know, they're advancing presentation, but they're not advancing mechanics. Like it's still isometric squares, and there's not even like complex map design. There's no level depth or anything on these Fire Emblem maps, and it makes me so frustrated because you look at Codename Steam and like they were doing like a Valkyria Chronicles. They were pushing the genre forward, the tactical genre forward. That was the best map designs Intelligent Systems has ever had, and like the way you navigated those was like cool and interesting, and they threw it all away. They threw it all away. If Codename Steam was just a Fire Emblem game, you know, it would have that would have been what the series is. I think it would be an evolution of that. Fire Emblem Engage on the Switch would look like a fancier Valkyria Chronicles, but because no one played that game, they just thought it was a complete failure and got rid of all of it, and that makes me sad. Because really, Fire Emblem Engage, as much fun as I'm having with it, it's still like really fucking basic and it feels really old. And if you look at that gameplay, maybe the animations look nice, but it's the same shit I've been playing for decades now. It's crazy. So yeah, it's just sort
Dang.
of a bit of a Fire Emblem rant, and I enjoy it. It's comfort food for me. But like, I don't blame somebody like Nick bouncing off or other people for not really wanting to engage with this game because
There it is again.
this shit is old, man. And Intelligence had it, and y'all fucked
It is
up. Y'all
whack.
didn't buy it. David bought all the copies now. Hit him up for a copy of the game. He has all the copies of Codename Steam. That shit was cool. And yeah, that's my final
Also,
thought.
if you're a newer listener to our show, Brad's not kidding. David does have hundreds of copies of Codename Steam that
I don't think
he
it's
is.
hundreds, but it's a lot.
I mean, at one point it probably was.
Dozens.
I remember seeing that shit on his shelf, and it's just like stacks and stacks and stacks of them.
He has
Um,
more than 20.
So Chris Davis, what's your final thought?
That's a good first. That's a good first chat from
Avenging Pineapple.
Turd.
Okay. My 4-player minute is basically just a hype for the next 7 days. The review embargo for Dead Space, the remake, came out this morning at about 10 o'clock, and it has been largely through the roof in terms of review quality.
I know, which is
it
not only good for my
sounds-
team, but also like I'm learning stuff about this game that I didn't know about, and it's kind of getting me excited to play it. I really did think this was like a visual like gussying up of the game, kind of like a Last of Us Part 1 or whatever the fuck. But no, they actually like really kind of tinkered with this thing, and what I saw sounds really cool. I finally just before the show watched the Sphere Hunter, the Susie Hunter, whatever she calls her, review, Dead Space review, and it was really good. I didn't know that they added in like a Resident Evil style map, and you can just
Yes.
like instead of using a line to like guide yourself everywhere, you can like use a Resident Evil style map, and now everything is like connected, and there's backtracking, and there's reasons to backtrack,
Yes.
and they have an AI enemy director that's like putting in like random like encounters, like almost like a Left 4, an AI director like
Yes.
Left 4 Dead, and I'm like, wow, this is like
Motive
this
put a
sounds
lot of
good.
effort
So
into
I'm
this.
probably gonna play this now.
Yeah.
Wait,
it's,
Like,
that's-
did they not market this very well? Because
No,
I feel like they should
did a
have done
bunch-
a better job of telling people what this thing actually was. But maybe I wasn't paying attention.
They've
they
been
did a
pretty
they did a lot of
straightforward.
developer. They did literally a lot of developer like tech heavy demonstrations where they were like,
Yeah, which I didn't care about that stuff.
but that's where they were digging into a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, like the AI system,
Yeah.
and stuff like they've talked about it, but maybe not in the same way that they would normally market a game like this. So you're right, some people may have missed some of those points, but they did talk about them for sure.
Yeah, like the combat system of Dead Space is solid enough to where it doesn't need really much improvement, to bring it into the modern day to be against its contemporaries. It's the whole marketing run for this game since its inception to release tomorrow. They have been very forefront about talking about upgrading the technology, improving every visual and audio aspect possible,
But that's the
and
part that's
improving
not
the
interesting.
systems of enemy generation and the visual language of the world.
I think it's just a lot easier. It's a lot harder for people to buy into the idea that this is going to be more like Resident Evil 2 remake because it hasn't been as long since the original. So I think a lot of people, Brad included, were probably just under the impression that it was going to be mostly just a visual upgrade,
Yeah.
which I get.
I mean, most of the words that just came out of your mouth, Chris Davis, were visual technology stuff, but I was just, yeah, I was surprised.
Well, when
it's
I'm
cool.
talking about the visuals, like
I do understand what Chris Davis is saying too, because I've also like both Chris Davis and I have both been saying this for months. Is like this is not just a visual upgrade of this game.
yeah, like what the main thing I'm
but
talking about with like visuals is
no-
like the language of the world. So like in Dead Space 1 and less so in 2 and 3, but mostly in 1, you could tell what to expect of a room when you went into it, because once you figured out that the necromorphs maneuvered through the ventilation shafts, you automatically could just eye a ventilation shaft and know exactly what to expect of where you're in a room and what encounter and figure out the triggers. Like in this, they have addressed that from what I understand. Like you may not know what to expect of a room even if you're playing like New Game Plus 5.
The AI director almost can literally ensure that, with the exception of in a few scenarios where it's like obviously scripted a specific way, you can play the game twice and rooms will have different encounters from playthrough to playthrough, and that
I'm just
in and of
excited about the
itself is
backtracking
exciting.
and not having to rely on that stupid line.
Because
they changed the way like locked doors
and,
work and stuff. You know,
Yeah.
now you have like key cards or like sort of tied to your suit, almost like Metal Gear Solid or whatever. Or not Metal Gear Solid, but it's Metal Gear Solid. So you're going back to like previous areas and shit, and you're encountering stuff. I don't know. I'm excited.
Also, I really want to mention real quick about Dead Space before I move on. They've added a bunch of extra content. Evidently, there is actually a secret ending to the game. And that gets me excited about if they're doing stuff like that and the game is being rated so well, it's probably going to sell pretty decently, especially for a survival horror game.
I think that's more exciting because it sounds like they're maybe setting this up to be like an actual rebirth of the franchise, and that this is not going to be a one and done kind of thing.
I think Motive has found their franchise to work on for the next generation. I think
let's not go too crazy here. Well, I guess
look,
generation.
the one thing about Motive that's been going that people have disparaged them about since they opened as a studio is that they've mainly been like support teams or working on smaller projects. Like the two things that they're known for are the Battlefront 2 campaign and Star Wars Squadrons, which Squadrons in and of itself, pared down project, but mechanically worked really well.
Very
and
cool
like
game.
This is like their first time for like to really stretch their legs and show what they can do, and they have. I look forward to finding out where they're at.
Do you think their next project is an original Dead Space game, or do you think they remake the second one?
I don't think they do a remake of Dead Space 2. I think if they're going to work on Dead Space again, it's going to be a full-on either direct sequel that does something else entirely, or it's Dead Space 4.
I just want to add on to that. My hope is that they do something original, and they don't just go straight into remaking all the games. This is not a Resident Evil.
Do Dead Space 0.
This is not a Resident Evil situation where I think I don't think they need to just keep remaking those 2 and 3. Like, just let those be their thing and call this the new starting point of a franchise and go from there. The problem with that is, and you made a pretty bold statement about like maybe EA Motive has found their franchise or whatever. And sure, they're doing a lot of really cool things with this remake, and they're stretching their legs as developers, which is fantastic, obviously. But you got to remember, still, they're building on the foundation of something that already existed.
Yes.
So like, it's hard to say I want them to keep making Dead Space games when they haven't.
We're not ready for Bluepoint to make a Shadow of the Colossus 2 or anything. You know
I mean, honestly, the day that Bluepoint announces their first original project, I will be very excited, but also very hesitant. You know what I mean? But that's not to say I don't want them to try. It's not that I don't want them to try. I certainly do. And if EA Motive making the next original Dead Space is what needs to happen for Dead Space to be a thing, obviously, fucking yes, make it happen. But it is not. I don't think Dead Space 1 remake being a huge success necessarily guarantees that a Dead Space 2 original game from EA Motive is a guaranteed thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe they call it Dead Space Zero G,
Or maybe just
whatever.
call it Dead Space something, like drop the numbers, start giving it subtitles so we don't get fucking bogged down in numerical
The deadest
order or
space.
whatever. The
The
deadest of space.
yeah. The
Do
other thing.
you know there's the rumors for Blue Point is like a significant remake of Metal Gear Solid.
Yes.
Yeah, that's been bouncing around for a while,
I don't
hasn't
know
it?
about that. What do you know about that?
I mean,
Interesting.
I love what they did with Demon Souls, and that would be even bolder.
I
things than
trust
that.
Blue Point. If they
But
can,
who do they get to voice Snake?
they might get David Hayter again. Why not?
I think he's out. I think he burned that bridge.
I think he burned that bridge
Is this
with
going to be a
Kojima,
Sam
but
Fisher
Kojima's
situation
gone,
where
man.
they just get some random, mook, and he just is like,
They find the best David Hayter impersonator they can find.
Yeah, they'll find something.
don't do that.
But anyway,
Okay.
let me finish my 4-player minute real quick, which has been going on for 10 minutes. The other thing I wanted to mention was I'm really looking forward to next week's show if Nolan could be on, because another announcement that came very recently was the next SteamWorld game. It's SteamWorld.
I thought we talked about that. Did we talk about that on a show?
No, we didn't. We didn't.
No, it
Oh.
got announced on, I think, Monday. I think it's when it was announced.
Oh.
But yeah, no, it's the next SteamWorld game. It's called Build, and it's right up Nolan's alley because it is a city builder with mining mechanics to go under the ground and build out your town.
That is Nolan's jam.
And there's a demo of it available right now for people to get on Steam.
He's
a
not
demo.
he's not on the podcast tonight because he's most certainly playing that right now.
That might be what's
that's a lie.
happening.
That's a
So-
lie. Thank you, Chris Davis. I'll
Yeah.
keep my 4-player minute pretty brief. I'm gonna go ahead. Maybe this is dangerous. I'm gonna talk about Hogwarts Legacy for a second. Previews started dropping this week. I've said this many times. This is perhaps one of my most anticipated games of the generation, despite all the controversy. But one thing I noticed is that with the preview footage, and I can kind of understand why they might be doing it this way, but I'm also kind of very hesitant of the fact that they're doing it this way. Is that they seem to be gravitating very heavily towards letting like YouTubers do the preview footage. Like they're doing a lot of demos for prominent YouTubers. And I think IGN has a preview that went up and stuff, so it's not all YouTubers and whatnot, but a lot of the impressions videos that have been out this week have been from prominent YouTubers who have played the first couple hours, and I'm wondering if that is a direct if that is a strategy for addressing their concerns with how the game is going to do amongst critics because of the controversy. Because obviously you get YouTubers to do it. YouTubers will do anything to play a game early. And, they're probably far less prone to like dredging up all the controversy.
Is
or
it
maybe
like
negative about
Harry
it
Potter
because of this.
YouTubers? They might be doing that
mean-
because random schmoes might be less critical of a game
That's what I'm
that's sort of
saying. No-
mid.
Okay, well, it's that too, potentially. But it seems odd to me because I saw that IGN did a preview, and then every other video I saw was from a YouTuber, and I can't help but wonder
I think
how
that's
much
just
of that
the
is
state of
dude.
how they market their games. I mean,
I
all the other
I don't think so, man. I don't
games
feel like
journalists
this.
have been fucking fired because there's none left.
I mean, that I don't want. I mean, when a game is being previewed, usually there are lots of previews from all kinds of outlets and whatnot, and obviously this in like official media outlets, you're seeing a lot of the content around this game focused on the controversy for obvious reasons, for good reasons. And I can't help but feel that maybe the strategy is so heavily focused on YouTubers because they want to avoid that, and maybe that's early signs that they're concerned about the way this game is going to be received by the media. It's a concern.
Here's the reality, and I think it might be a sad one because I think people who are upset are like I think they're justified to have those opinions. Like
Well, of course.
it's fine, but I think you are overestimating how much that's actually going to be sadly, I think you're overestimating how much that's going to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the people you follow on Twitter, and I know maybe a lot of people, a lot of those people are upset, but I think that this game is going to drown out, sadly, and I think that's the sad reality. I think it's going to drown out this sort of quote unquote controversy. I don't think that
Well, in the spirit of
it's
that point that you're making,
I
one thing I want to be clear about too is that, like, you're right. I think it would be a very sad thing if that part of the conversation is drowned out, because that part of the conversation absolutely has to be addressed. But the other part of it is, like, I want, and this is in a perfect world. Obviously, we don't live in a perfect world. I'm sitting here thinking, like,
not even close.
not even close, and that's obviously very obviously rooted in this controversy. But, like, I want those conversations to happen. They need to happen. They need to be a huge part of the conversation. But at the same time, I want those conversations to. I still want to be able to look at, like, a review of the game and know whether the game is good or not. You know what I mean? Like, if that part of the conversation dominates the review, it's going to be like, well, how much of that is because of the controversy versus how much of that is, like, is the game itself at its core, when you remove those elements, is it good?
Wait,
Does that make sense?
but
I'm having a hard time.
I don't think that stuff is going to affect like review scores. I think if anything, it's just going to mean some people are going to refuse to review the game. But that's
People or outlets?
huh?
You said people are going to refuse to review the game. Are you saying people are going
No,
to
no, no.
refuse, or outlets are going to
Both.
refuse?
Some people
That's my
within those
concern.
outlets, and some outlets might be refused to review the game. But I think when you get a review, it's not going to be like, well, this game's okay, but I docked it 10 points because the author's sucks. You know, that's not going to be what is happening with the
First of all,
reviews of this game.
I think you're oversimplifying it by saying people are going to be like, oh, the author sucks, so I'm going to dock 10 points. I don't think that's what's happening here.
No, of course not.
But
you think people are just going to be angry at?
I don't think it's going to be possible to objectively review this game. So how do you write reviews for it? Because if the game is legitimately, like, one of the best games of the year, it's like a 90s game.
But I'm saying it just doesn't fucking happen, man. Like, Orson Scott Card's a piece of shit, but, like, Shadow Complex still got good fucking reviews. I think people are gonna voice their opinions where it needs to be voiced, and it does need to be voiced in this situation. But when it comes to, like, putting pen to paper or whatever the fuck and writing the review, I just don't think that that's gonna influence, like,
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, and I know that. I don't want that to sound like me saying.
And I don't think that.
This is why it's messy. I'm just saying we're getting to that point because it's coming out in like 12 days, which still blows my mind when I think about it. We're approaching the danger zone. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know what's gonna fucking happen, and I want all these different conversations to happen, but I also want to know if the game's good. So it's just like,
there will be no. I promise you, there will be plenty of conversation about the quality or lack thereof of the new Harry Potter game. It'll be all people are talking about.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Sorry, I know somehow it was 3 people, and our 4-player minute was longer than I think it's been in a very long time.
Yeah, because we have room to breathe.
So that's going to be it for us this week, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. If you're watching us live, of course, you can find us in Discord at discord.gg/4player. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us at 4playernetwork.com. Please subscribe to the show. If you follow us on YouTube, like and leave a comment or whatever. If you'd like to listen to the audio podcast, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'd love to have you. But of course, most importantly, join us in Discord. If you're new, pop into that introductions channel in Discord. Let us know. Say hi. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, that's it. This is actually, we should have broken this into 2 segments. Fuck. Okay. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next week. We'll talk about Dead Space and other things. So don't miss
Forspoken, it. Man.
And Forspoken, my guaranteed 2023 game of the year.
Hi-Fi Rush. Don't forget that.
Calling it now. Wait, what?
You're gonna
Hi-Fi
bounce off
Rush,
that shit like you
we're
did
gonna need to
Onimusha 4.
I didn't bounce off Onimusha 4. I beat Onimusha 4 and I hate it.
Yeah, you're a weird man.
So yeah, yeah. Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Good night.
Bye. Onimusha 4, that fake ass video game.